The snowstorm had ripped through the northern plains like a whip. Stinging and sudden, wind howled through the pines, flinging ice in all directions, carving white walls where fences had stood the night before. And in that roaring white silence, Elias Granger spotted her. He'd come up the ridge just after dawn, wrapped in oilskin and wool, reins stiff in his rawhide gloves. His horse snorted clouds of steam. Cattle tracks had vanished overnight. He squinted against the blowing snow, scanning the fence line he'd built with his own hands. That's when he saw it. A black shape, half buried where the wind had pushed snow against the rocks like a coffin lid. At first, he thought it might be a calf gone astray, or a coyote curled in death. But the shape didn't fit. It was too thin, too still. He dismounted slow, boots crunching over crusted snow, hand on the butt of his revolver. His breath hung in front of him like smoke from a dying fire. 10 feet away, he stopped. It was a girl, maybe 15, maybe younger. She lay on her side, arms drawn to her chest, like she'd been trying to keep herself warm. Her skin was a grayish blue, lashes iced over. Snow clung to the hem of her dress. A cotton thing, threadbare and torn, not made for winter. Her lips were cracked. Blood had dried at the corner of her mouth. She wasn't dead, not yet. Jesus, Elias muttered. He dropped to one knee, yanked off a glove, and pressed his fingers to the side of her neck. Cold. But there, a heartbeat. Faint, but steady. Her eyelids fluttered, lashes cracking the frost. He wrapped her in his coat without thinking, lifted her like a sack of grain, so light it made his chest tighten, bones mostly. Her breath came in shallow gasps against his collarbone as he mounted up and pressed heels to flank. "Come on," he whispered to the horse. "Get us home." The ride back took 40 minutes, maybe less, but to Elias it felt like years. By the time they reached the ranch, the storm had thickened, wind shrieking across the flatlands like a banshee let loose. His horse slipped twice on the icy rise, nearly pitching them both. But the girl never moved, never spoke. He burst into the cabin with her in his arms, snow clinging to his back and boots, kicking the door shut behind him. The fire was already low. He set her down on the bearskin rug and moved fast, stoking the stove, boiling water, dragging every quilt and blanket he owned off the cot. As he worked, he studied her face. She had high cheekbones, thin lips, and a smudge of dirt across her temple. A bruise, too, dark purple, fading into yellow. Her hands were scraped raw, as if she'd crawled. Frostbite painted her fingers white. She'd come through something terrible. That much was clear. She should have been dead. She should have frozen solid out there. And yet, she'd made it this far. Why? He stripped off her wet dress down to her shift. Modest, careful, and wrapped her in blankets warm from the stove. He poured a little warmed whiskey between her lips. Slow. She choked, coughed, then fell still again. No words, no thanks, just shallow breathing and that bruised, hollow face. Elias sat back on his haunches and stared at her. The wind banged something loose on the porch, a shutter or a hitching post. He didn't move. She was just a girl, but she hadn't gotten here by accident. The snow let up that afternoon. Outside, the sky turned pale gold behind the clouds, like firelight behind paper. Elias stepped out with a shotgun slung over his shoulder, eyes sweeping the empty hills. There were no tracks but his own. He rode the northern perimeter again, carefully this time, looking for signs, nothing. No wagon wheels, no boot prints, no other riders, just the hard, flat silence of snow that had fallen too fast and too thick to hold memory. Whoever she'd been with, she'd been alone when the storm took her, but someone must have left her there, maybe not by accident. When he returned near dusk, she was sitting up, barely, her body wrapped tight, eyes open but distant. She stared into the fire like it told stories only she could hear. He sat across from her on the floor. "Got a name?" he asked. No answer. Her lips parted, but only a whisper of breath escaped. He handed her a mug of thin broth. She took it with trembling fingers, held it close, but didn't drink. "Don't have to talk," he said finally, "but you're safe here, for now." At that, her eyes flicked to him, just for a second. There was something sharp there. Not fear, not thanks. Something like warning. He spent the night in the rocker by the fire, shotgun across his lap. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. The storm passed, but the cold stayed. And with it, a silence that was thick and strange, like the land itself was waiting. Elias had lived alone for years, by choice, had made peace with quiet. But this wasn't peace, this was something else. Just before dawn, she spoke. Only 2 words. Not a name, not a thank you. "They're coming." Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed against the pillows like the breath had been punched from her. Elias sat forward, heart hammering. Outside, in the pre-dawn dark, a coyote howled once, and far off, carried on the wind, came the faintest sound of hooves on frozen ground. The next morning broke with brittle cold and blue silence. The storm had passed, but it had left the world glassy and mean. Icicles hung from the eaves like teeth. The snow sparkled under the rising sun, beautiful in the way a blade catches light just before it cuts. Elias Granger stood at the window with his coffee, watching the land he'd spent years trying to forget. His horse stood motionless at the fence line. No new tracks, no riders. But the echo of hoofbeats, faint, distant, still rang in his bones from the girl's whispered warning the night before. Behind him, she stirred. He turned. She was awake, sitting up straighter than before, one arm still wrapped in wool, the other curled protectively around her chest. She didn't speak, didn't look at him, just stared at the fire like it might burn away whatever memory had hollowed her out. He brought her more broth. She took it without thanks. "Storm's passed," Elias said quietly. "You made it through." Still no reply. "You gonna tell me who you are?" Silence. He sat opposite her again, letting the quiet settle. This kind of stillness didn't bother him. He'd spent enough time on his own to know words weren't always worth the breath it took to make them. But this girl's silence wasn't peace. It was armor. Her eyes flicked toward the window, then the door, then back to the fire, calculating. She was trying to decide if she was safe here, or if she'd have to run again. "Snow covered your tracks," he said, sipping his coffee. "You're lucky I found you. Another hour, maybe 2, you'd have been a corpse." That got a reaction. Her hands clenched tighter around the mug. Not fear, not gratitude, shame. Elias saw it clear as daylight, and something else underneath. Anger, directed inward. A girl too young to carry so much fury, but doing it anyway. He studied her face again in the firelight. High cheekbones, delicate nose, skin too pale for a frontier life. But her hands were rough, scraped, bruised, fingers raw around the nails, the kind of damage that didn't come from frost alone. She hadn't just wandered into a storm. She'd crawled through hell to get here. And someone had made her. By mid-morning, Elias went to check the barn. Just enough chores to justify leaving the cabin, to clear his thoughts. The storm had done some damage. Shingles torn loose. The chicken pen drifted in snow. He worked in silence, but his mind wouldn't quiet. When he returned to the cabin, the girl was no longer on the cot. For a moment, panic flared in his chest. Then he heard it, a soft creak from behind the door to his room. He pushed it open gently. She stood with her back to him, staring at the bureau where he kept his personal things. She wasn't rifling through drawers, just looking, the way someone looks at a map before deciding which road to take. She turned slowly. Her eyes didn't widen in guilt or fear. Instead, she studied him like she was trying to decide what kind of man he was. Elias didn't raise his voice. "You find what you were looking for?" She said nothing, just backed out into the main room, slow, careful. That night, Elias placed her tray on the table, instead of handing it to her. "I buried someone once," he said. "She was about your size. My niece. Died from a fever she caught in town, just after her mother passed. No one left to look after her." The girl didn't flinch, didn't blink, but her throat moved, swallowing something heavy. "Didn't think I'd see another kid around here," Elias said, "not this far out. So when one shows up in the snow, half dead, wearing silk ribbons under frostbite, makes a man wonder." He waited. She sipped her broth. Didn't speak, but her hand, the one holding the cup, shook just a little. That night, when she finally slept, Elias did what he hadn't done in years. He searched. Not her body, not her bags. She didn't have any, just the clothes she'd arrived in. But inside the seam of her dress, sewn into the lining like a secret, he found a silver brooch, tiny, tarnished, but unmistakable, an emblem, crowned scales over a sunburst, flanked by 2 hammers, a legal seal, one he recognized from court documents, back when land grants still needed verifying, and beneath it, carved in tiny filigree script, H. Harland Harrow, a federal judge with more reach than most governors, a man whose name made cattle barons go quiet. He'd passed through this territory last fall. Elias remembered hearing about it at the feed store, something about hearings on land disputes and wagon contracts, and now this girl, dressed in silk under rags, with that man's mark sewn into her clothes. Elias stared at the brooch for a long time before sliding it back into its hiding place. Then he banked the fire, bolted the door, and laid his shotgun across his lap. Whatever trouble this girl carried, it wasn't just personal, it was political, and it was coming. The next day brought more questions than answers. Elias tried again. "Did you run away from someone?" No reply. "You in trouble?" "Nothing." "You know Harland Harrow?" Her eyes darted to his, just for a second, then back to the fire. But that look said enough. She knew the name. She knew it too well. He poured coffee into his tin cup, sat back down. "All right," he said. "We'll do it your way." He didn't press her after that. Didn't need to. The pieces were already forming into something dangerous. And that night, after the wind died and the stars cut through the black sky like blades, Elias sat on his porch with his rifle across his knees, not because he thought she'd run, but because he was certain someone was coming to take her back. By the 4th day, the girl had stopped flinching at every sound. but she still hadn't told him her name. Elias didn't press. He'd seen enough broken creatures, two-legged and four, to know some wounds needed silence more than stitches. She'd eat, sleep, even watch him while he worked around the cabin. But never a word, never a smile. He didn't ask where she came from anymore. He just let her heal in the quiet. It was just after noon, the sun hanging pale and low behind a curtain of cloud, when Elias heard hooves. Not a distant echo, not the ghost of a storm memory, real, hard hooves on frozen dirt. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, but down at his side. One rider, dark coat, high in the saddle, horse lathered from a long ride. The man approached with confidence, not haste. Someone used to being obeyed. When he got close enough, Elias saw the glint of brass pinned to the man's chest. U.S. Marshal. Afternoon, the rider called, pulling up just short of the porch. His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. Elias nodded. Marshal. The man dismounted slowly, brushing dust from his gloves. Name's Ransom, Marshal Luther Ransom, out of the 3rd District. He gestured toward the cabin. This your land? Elias gave a single nod. Elias Granger. Been here a while. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Reckon you will anyway. The marshal chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Got a missing person on my docket. Young lady. Slipped away from a federal escort on the way east. Judge Harland Harrow's niece, or ward, depends who's telling it. Elias didn't blink. That's so? Name's Lottie Harrow, 17. Small thing, blonde. Slipped away 2 towns over during a supply stop. Thought she might have headed north, maybe hit one of these outlying ranches. Elias leaned against the post, arms crossed. Haven't seen anyone. Marshal Ransom's jaw tightened just a hair. He wasn't new at this. You sure? Last folks she was seen with were government men. Pinkertons, maybe. They say she's not quite right in the head. Prone to confusion. Might not even know who she is. Still haven't seen her, Elias said flatly. Silence fell between them. The wind tugged at the marshal's coat. You mind if I have a look around? Ransom asked. Not accusing, just making sure she ain't laid up in your barn with a busted ankle. Elias's eyes narrowed. Got a sick heifer back there, but no girl. Well, Ransom said, adjusting his gloves. A quick look wouldn't hurt, would it? Actually, Elias said, stepping forward just enough. It would. Their eyes locked. Ransom's hand drifted near his coat, but didn't land on his gun. Elias didn't move. You got a warrant? He asked. Just questions. Then you can ask 'em from the road. Ransom's gaze lingered on the cabin, on the curtain moving slightly behind the glass. He smiled. That coffee I smell. Elias didn't answer. I won't take more of your time, Mr. Granger, the marshal said, stepping back to his horse. But if you do see her, or if someone shows up needing shelter, well, she ain't just a lost lamb. Judge Harrow wants her back under his roof, and that kind of man, he don't like being disobeyed. Elias stared as the marshal mounted up. One more thing, Ransom said, adjusting in the saddle. They say the girl's dangerous. Killed a man back in Kansas. Maybe 2. That kind of wild doesn't last long out here. Not without help. He tipped his hat. Stay warm. Elias watched him ride away until the dust settled. Inside the cabin, the girl was standing near the stove, hands balled into fists at her sides. She hadn't touched her food. Her lips were tight. You heard? He said. She gave a single nod. Was any of it true? She didn't move. I need to know what's coming, girl, he said, quieter now. because this ain't just a question of shelter anymore. That man had the law behind him, and if Judge Harrow sent him— "He's not my uncle," she said suddenly. Her voice was hoarse, but clear. Elias blinked. She spoke again, slower, firmer. "He's not my uncle, not by blood, not by law." Then silence. She turned and sat slowly by the fire, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. Elias waited, didn't press, let the quiet settle. Finally she whispered, "He bought me." The words were soft, but they landed like thunder. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Elias stared into the flames, rage coiling in his gut. "You run from him?" Her chin dipped, barely. "You kill anybody?" Her eyes lifted to his. "He tried to take me." In the dark. His man held my arms. A pause. I got the knife first. A long breath passed between them. Elias nodded. He didn't ask why she hadn't told him sooner. He knew why. Trust came slow to people who'd been treated like property. He tossed another log on the fire, watching the sparks jump. "Well," he said, voice like gravel, "seems you've stirred up a hornet's nest." Lottie gave the faintest smile, and hornets don't like being lied to. That night, Elias saddled his horse and rode out 3 miles to the top of Pine Hollow Ridge. From there he could see the road east. A campfire glowed in the distance. Small, controlled. Ransom hadn't gone far, just enough to watch. Elias cursed under his breath and rode back down the ridge, heart thudding like a war drum. They were being watched, which meant Lottie's time in hiding was short. The law was coming, and this time it wouldn't come asking. It would come breaking. The next morning came hollow and gray, the sun just a pale smudge behind clouds that never quite let go of winter. Snow lay untouched across the valley floor. Elias watched it from the porch, steam rising off his coffee like smoke from a dying fire. He hadn't slept. Marshal Ransom was still out there. He could feel it, somewhere beyond the ridge, watching, waiting. The man rode with quiet authority, but there was blood on his breath. Elias had seen it in his eyes. He stepped back inside, bolted the door, and stoked the stove. The girl was still wrapped in the same wool blanket, tucked into the corner of the cabin like a memory someone tried to forget. Her face was pale, lips cracked, but her eyes were steady now, watching him. "You eat?" Elias asked. She shook her head. "You need to." "I can't." Her voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in years. "Not until I say it." Elias didn't speak. He sat in the rocker by the fire and waited. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, as if bracing against more than the cold. "They kept me in a room with velvet curtains," she said, a voice flat, "in a house with chandeliers and books no one read. They dressed me up, called me Miss Harrow in front of company. I was something to show off, a polished thing." Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "They said I was family, but I never saw a birth record, never saw my name on a single page. I just arrived there, from an orphanage back east. I think they paid the nuns to forget me." She looked up at Elias. "He told me I owed him, for education, for food, for the bed I slept in. Said I was lucky." Her hands trembled. "But then he'd drink, and the house would get quiet, and the lock on my door wouldn't hold." A long silence followed. The fire popped. "I didn't scream," she whispered. "Not once, because screaming wouldn't help. I just waited for the sun to come back." Elias felt something cold settle in his chest, deeper than anger, a weight made of helplessness. 2 weeks ago, they packed up for travel, she continued. Said we were heading to Denver, that he had court business. I was to ride in the back of the coach with a chaperone. Her mouth twisted. That's what they called him, a chaperone. Pinkerton? She nodded. He wasn't there to guard me. He was there to keep me quiet. Her fingers found the edge of the blanket and picked at it like stitching. But that night, we stopped to change horses. They left the coach door open. I ran. Didn't think, didn't plan. I ran into the dark until I couldn't feel my feet. You were alone the whole way? She nodded. Until you, she added. Until snow. Until you found me. Elias exhaled, a long breath through his teeth. What happened to the man you... He paused. The one you said you got the knife first on. He was drunk, said I was lucky to be raised right, said he'd make sure I was obedient. Her voice cracked. I slit his neck with a letter opener. I don't even remember grabbing it. She looked up. Do you think that makes me a murderer? No, Elias said. I think it makes you alive. Later that afternoon, Elias sat by the barn, sharpening his axe. Not for use, just for rhythm, just for the feel of something clean. His mind raced. The brooch in her dress, the marshal on the ridge, the judge with power to bend counties and congressmen, and the girl, barely 17, who had taken a man's life with the precision of someone who'd already been forced to die 100 quiet deaths before it. Inside, she was sleeping again, the deep kind, the kind that only comes after truth finally spills. He looked up at the hills. Marshal Ransom hadn't come for justice. He'd come to put a lid on something dangerous, and now Elias was in it, neck deep. That night he loaded his rifle and stood at the cabin door long past midnight. The wind had quieted, but the quiet was worse, the kind of silence where something waited to break. Inside, Lottie stirred. They won't stop, she said from the shadows. He'll send more. I know. You should let me go. I'll run again. That way they won't come for you. Elias shook his head, eyes fixed on the dark tree line. I don't run girls off into snow. Silence stretched. Then she said something that cut through the dark like lightning. I heard him brag once. About a judge in Kansas who sold him 5 girls. About how he made sure they didn't talk. Elias turned to her. He said he made them disappear like river mist. That no law in the territory could touch him because they all owed him. She swallowed. Said I was lucky I was pretty enough to keep. Said ugly girls got traded off. Elias's hands clenched on the rifle. She looked at him through the firelight. So you see, if I go back, I'm gone. He nodded slowly. Then you won't go back. They sat in silence as the wind shifted again, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. Not a warning, a promise. The sun never rose that morning, just brightened the sky enough to turn the snow from black to gray. Cold hung heavy over the ranch like breath held too long. Elias Granger saddled his horse in silence, hands practiced and slow. Lottie stood by the barn door, bundled tight in his old coat. It dwarfed her frame. She hadn't said much since last night, but something in her had changed. Her shoulders squared differently. Her eyes didn't dart. They waited. Elias finished the cinch and handed her the canteen. You ride east with this. Cross the river trail, follow it to Brody's Bluff. Abandoned trading shack up there. Still has a roof. I'm not hiding, she said. I know. He adjusted the rifle strap across his back. But they'll come for you, she added. They're already here. She stepped forward, voice tight. "Then I ride with you." He gave a single shake of the head. "You ride away, quiet and fast, if I'm not back by sundown." He didn't finish. She looked like she might argue, but then she saw the way he checked the rounds in his Winchester, the quiet rhythm of a man preparing for a day that might be his last. "I'll wait," she said, voice breaking, "but not forever." Elias rode out just past dawn, taking the high trail north, the one with full view of the ridge and clear shooting lanes if trouble followed. It was quiet. Too quiet. His horse moved slow, careful. Snow had crusted to ice overnight, and every step cracked like dry bone. Halfway up the trail he dismounted and walked the rest on foot, boots crunching softly, rifle loose in his hands. He didn't have to wait long. From the bend just ahead, a voice called out, "Mr. Granger." Elias stopped cold. Marshal Ransom stepped into view, coat flapping lightly in the wind. His hat brim was dusted with frost. He had two men with him, one tall and thin, the other broad-shouldered with a scattergun slung over his back. Neither looked like lawmen, hired guns, likely. "You're up early," Elias said. "Thought we'd talk," Ransom replied, man to man. "Seems to me you said all you came to say." Ransom smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, things have changed. My jurisdiction's been expanded." "By who?" "Judge Harrow's signature carries weight in 3 states. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You got a warrant?" Ransom nodded toward the broad man. "Left it in my saddlebag. But truth be told, I figured it was easier if we didn't waste time on paperwork." Elias shifted his stance. "You know she's not his kin." "I know she's his problem," Ransom said, the smile gone now. "And I know she ran from a man who's protected. That makes her dangerous." "She's a child. She's a witness," Ransom snapped. "And you're an accessory now." Elias lowered his voice. "Is that what you tell yourself? So you sleep at night?" Ransom's jaw twitched. "I don't much care for moral sermons from men who break the law to keep a girl warm." He stepped forward. "Hand her over, Granger. You walk away. No charges, no trouble." Elias didn't blink. "I already told you." He raised the rifle just enough. "She's not going back." The next moment moved like lightning striking dry grass. The thin man reached for his gun. Elias fired first. The echo cracked the ridge wide open. The thin man dropped without a sound, falling backward into the snow like a rag doll hurled by God. Ransom ducked and shouted something lost in the wind. The broad-shouldered man leveled his scattergun, but Elias rolled behind a fallen log, another shot already chambered. The blast took bark off the trunk above his head, scattering wood like shrapnel. Elias fired back, and the buckshot man screamed, gut shot, maybe worse, and crumpled out of sight. That left just Ransom. He'd taken cover behind a rock outcropping, firing blind. His boots crunched as he moved. Elias circled low, flanking him slow and wide, heart pounding but hands steady. He caught sight of Ransom's leg just as the marshal shifted for a better angle. Elias fired low. Ransom dropped to one knee, howling in pain. "You son of a—" he barked. Elias moved in fast, boot-crushing fresh snow. Ransom raised his revolver, but Elias was already there, slamming the butt of his rifle into the man's wrist. The gun clattered away. They hit the ground hard, fists flying. Ransom was strong, trained, and fighting like a man with his life on the line. But Elias had built fences, buried cattle, and held his brother's dead weight through 3 winters. He fought with purpose. He fought for the girl. A punch cracked Ransom's jaw. Blood flew. Ransom staggered backward, spitting teeth. "She's dead anyway, you idiot. Harrow will send more. He owns men in Congress." Elias didn't say a word. He slammed the marshal's face into the snow and held it there until the fight drained from him like heat from a dying fire. When it was over, Elias stood there breathing hard, blood on his shirt, knuckles raw. The other two lay motionless. Ransom groaned in the drift beside the outcrop, broken but breathing. Elias picked up the marshal's revolver and tossed it down the ravine. "You tell Harrow," Elias said. "Tell him if he wants her, he can come himself." He rode back through the valley as the sun broke through. Gold light over white hills, wind still and waiting. Lottie stood where the bluff began, rifle in her hands, fear in her eyes. When she saw him, she ran forward. His horse stopped short as Elias dismounted, legs shaky, ribs bruised. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm fine. They tried to kill you. They failed." She looked past him at the empty hills. "And if they come again?" Elias stared east, where the road cut through pine and powder. "Then we'll stop them again," he said, one by one. He looked down at her. "You told the truth, Lottie, and truth's like fire. It spreads when you stop hiding it." She blinked at him. "My name. You used my name." He nodded. She smiled, for the first time. They rode into town 2 days later. Elias hadn't wanted to, but the girl needed medicine for her frostbitten hands, and the marshal's words still echoed in his mind. She's dead anyway. There was no hiding from what was coming. The snow would melt. The law would follow. So they saddled the mare and rode slow into Carrow's Hollow. It was a squat town nestled in the valley like it was ashamed of itself. One dusty main street, a sagging church, a saloon with a crooked sign, and a row of false front shops barely holding their teeth. It looked like a place no one important would bother with, but Elias had seen how men like Judge Harrow reached into towns like this. With gold, with threats, with paper that carried the weight of death, and someone here would be watching. He guided the horse down the center of the street, while Lottie sat behind him, face hidden beneath a shawl. Her fingers clutched his coat like a lifeline. They stopped outside the apothecary. Inside, the air smelled of alcohol and mint oil. Doc Harlan was a tall man with gray whiskers and eyes like winter mud. Always tired, never unkind. He blinked when he saw Elias. "Well, damn, Granger. Thought you'd buried yourself for good." "Need salves," Elias said. "Burn cream, something for infection." Doc glanced at the girl. "She hurt?" "She's healing." Doc didn't ask more, just nodded and turned toward the back shelves. But by the time they stepped outside again, 2 men were watching from the saloon doorway. One of them spat in the dirt. The other ducked inside. Lottie's fingers tightened. "They saw me," she whispered. "I know," Elias said. "Let 'em." By noon, the whole town knew. They'd taken a room at the boarding house. Widow Delaney ran it, all sharp elbows and soft eyes. She brought stew without being asked, and didn't blink when she saw Lottie's face. "You stay as long as you like," she said, "and if anyone knocks past sundown, I answer with a shotgun." Elias nodded his thanks, but the town buzzed like hornets behind shutters. Rumors spread fast, too fast. Elias heard them in the street. "That's the Harrow girl. She murdered a lawman. Granger's hiding a killer. She stole something from the judge." Something real valuable. No, she's his whore. That's why he wants her back. Elias walked to the sheriff's office that afternoon, boots thudding on dry boards. Sheriff Calder was in his chair, spitting into a dented can, boots on the desk like he had nowhere to be. Granger tipped his hat. Need to talk. Calder didn't move. I know what you're about to ask, the sheriff said. Then answer it. Calder leaned forward. I seen what rides into towns when men cross Harrow. I seen good families lose their land, their names, their daughters. I don't want that for Carrow's Hollow. She's not his daughter. She's not your fight either. Elias said nothing. Calder squinted. You killed a marshal. Didn't kill him. He drew first. He ain't riding again soon, but he's alive. You bring Harrow's trouble here, Granger. People'll turn. Then let 'em, Elias said. Let them choose, but they better choose knowing the truth. That night, Elias walked into the saloon. The music died. Cards froze mid-hand. Every eye turned. He moved slow, deliberate, toward the bar, with Lottie standing behind him, small, pale, wrapped in a faded coat, like armor. She has something to say, Elias said, and you all need to hear it. Someone scoffed. Someone else muttered, Murderer. Lottie stepped forward, and she spoke, not loud, not fast, but clear. She told them everything, about the judge, the lies, the locked rooms, the night she ran, the men sent to take her back. She showed the frostbite on her hands, the scar across her collarbone, the seal sewn into her dress. The room stayed quiet until someone shouted, She's lying. Harrow's a federal judge. Elias turned. It was Doyle Tanner, the banker, gold chain pocket watch, coat too clean. He backed land titles through Harrow's court. He'd never hurt a child. Tanner spat. She's just angry 'cause he disciplined her. Elias walked straight toward him. You ever heard a child describe a locked room, Tanner? Ever seen scars from a belt buckle wider than a man's hand? You think you're a hero, Granger? Tanner sneered. You think hiding trash makes you righteous? Elias didn't speak. He punched Doyle Tanner hard enough to knock 3 teeth onto the floorboards. The sheriff came an hour later. Elias expected chains, but Calder just sat across from him at the boarding house table, hat in hand. You want to testify? The sheriff asked quietly. You and the girl? I do, Elias said. She might not live through it. She already did, Elias replied. Now it's just the telling. Calder nodded slowly. Marshall's men will be here by Friday. You'll both be asked to ride with them. They'll say it's for her protection. She won't go without me. They won't want that. Then we got ourselves a choice to make. Calder stood. You know this town. They won't all stand with you. I only need enough. By morning the church bell rang, not for a funeral, but for something harder, something braver, a reckoning. The morning they came for her, the sky was white as bone. A low fog clung to the hills like breath that refused to leave. The wind had gone still, unnatural for spring. Nothing moved, no bird call, no creak of signboard, just the hush before something breaks. Elias stood on the church steps, rifle across his chest, coat collar up. Beside him, Lottie Harrow waited in silence. Her hair was pinned back. Her eyes didn't waver. They'd rung the bell at dawn. Now the town gathered slowly. Widow Delaney, Doc Harlan, a few shopkeepers, a pair of wranglers with rifles slung, the preacher. Calder, leaning on the railing, hand near his belt. Some faces showed fear, others just resignation. But they were there. That mattered. And then the riders came. 6 men, black coats, no badges, and at the center of them, Judge Harland Harrow. He rode a silver gelding like he was born in the saddle, back straight, eyes cold. His beard was trimmed sharp. His gloves were red leather, not dusted, not worn, clean. He dismounted before the church and removed his hat like a preacher at a grave. "Well," he said, voice rich and smooth, "you've made a mess, Mr. Granger." Elias didn't move. "I've come for my ward," Harrow said, looking past him, "and to collect a debt. That girl stole something sacred." "She didn't steal anything," Elias said. "She ran." Harrow smiled. "From safety, from family, from structure. She ran from a locked room and a loaded man." Murmurs from the crowd. The judge's smile faded. He looked at Calder. "Sheriff, I trust you'll arrest this man and deliver the girl. I have federal orders, signed and sealed." Calder didn't answer. "I'll read the warrant," Harrow offered. "It names both the girl and her abductor, names them fugitives." "Got my own eyes," Calder said, "and my own doubts. You're a civil servant," Harrow snapped. "Act like it." "No, sir," Calder replied. "Today I'm just a man, trying to choose right." The judge's voice turned cold. "Then let me help." He nodded. His men drew. Elias was already moving, rifle up before breath could be drawn. The first shot cracked the stillness like thunder. A man fell backward into the dust, blood blooming through his coat. Screams scattered the crowd. Calder dove behind the rail and returned fire. Widow Delaney dragged a child behind the feed barrel. Someone shouted for the Lord. Someone else screamed. Elias ducked as bullets tore into the church door behind him. Lottie didn't move. She stood tall on the steps, a pistol in both hands, the ones frostbitten and bandaged, steady as stone. She fired once, then again. The second shot dropped the man trying to flank Calder. By now the townsfolk who had chosen silence understood that silence wouldn't save them. Doc Harlan stepped from the apothecary with an old Navy Colt. The blacksmith fired from behind a wagon. A stable hand lobbed a lantern that burst in flame near Harrow's horse, sending the gelding rearing. Elias reloaded and swung his rifle toward the judge. But Harrow wasn't fighting. He was walking straight for the girl. Bullets snapped around him, yet none touched, as if hell protected its own. He stopped 10 paces from her. "Lottie," he called. She raised the pistol. "I told you once," he said. "You belonged to me, and you will again, even if I must cut your savior's throat in front of you." "No," she said, "even if I burn this town to the ground." "No," she said again, louder now, and then she said it a third time. Voice iron, eyes steel. "No, Harland, I don't belong to anyone." She fired. The pistol kicked back, hard. Her arm jerked. The shot struck low. The judge stumbled, grabbing his side. But he didn't fall. He laughed. "You'll hang for that, girl." "No," Elias said behind her. "But you will." Harrow turned just in time to see the butt of the rifle swinging up. The crack echoed down Main Street. He dropped to the ground, unconscious. The gunfire faded. Smoke drifted over the boardwalks. The last of the judge's men lay dead or fleeing. Sheriff Calder moved among the wounded, helping the ones who deserved it. The others he left where they fell. Elias knelt beside Lottie, his breath ragged. She looked at the judge, then at him. "Did we win?" she asked. "No," Elias said. But we didn't lose. It took 4 days to get the wire through. Took 5 more for the territorial marshals to arrive. But when they did, they listened. To Lottie, to Elias, to the town. They searched Harrow's coach, found records, sealed letters, forged documents, receipts for things no man should ever buy. Enough to make it stick. Harrow was taken in chains. He didn't speak a word. The trial happened in a larger town. Lottie testified. So did Elias, and Sheriff Calder, and Widow Delaney. In the end, the jury came back in under an hour. Guilty. On every count. They hanged Harland Harrow the next spring, just after the thaw. Elias didn't go to the hanging. Lottie didn't either. Some things didn't need to be watched. She stayed in Carrow's Hollow for a while, helped in the church, started a school with Widow Delaney. Some nights she sat on the porch of Elias's cabin, hands in her lap, face tilted toward the hills like she was still waiting for the wind to carry something away. He never asked her to stay. He just built her a second chair. She painted it herself, pale blue, with a gold stripe down the back. One day Elias found a letter on his table. She'd gone east, to testify again, this time for the other girls, the ones who hadn't survived. She signed the letter, Lottie Grace Harrow. Grace, a name she'd chosen for herself. Some say justice rides on a horse with a star, but sometimes it rides behind a weathered rancher and a girl who learned to fight, and sometimes all it takes to change a crooked world is a truth spoken loud enough to echo off the hills. The town of Carrow's Hollow was never the same after that winter, not because of the blood spilled or the trial that followed, though those left their scars, but because one girl spoke the truth, and a man who'd lived too long in silence chose to stand beside her. In a world where power wore a badge and evil dressed in robes, it was their courage, quiet, stubborn, raw, that carved a line in the snow and said, "No more." Elias Granger went back to his ranch, to the horses and the wind, and the sound of his own boots on frozen ground. But something in him had shifted. He'd spent a lifetime minding his own, believing the world turned whether he watched it or not. Lottie showed him otherwise. She taught him that silence can kill, and that standing up, even if it costs you everything, might just save someone else's life. As for Lottie Grace Harrow, she never looked back. She carried the weight of what was done to her, and the power of what she'd done in return. She spoke for the girls who couldn't. She fought with words instead of weapons. But make no mistake, she changed the map of justice, line by line. Sometimes the bravest people don't wear stars. Sometimes they ride in half-frozen and unspoken, and leave the whole world different.